fire, my back would be freezing. However, by turning myself round and round, I kept myself from perishing.
The boats ferry soldiers across the river, about 40 at a time. There are 2,400 men in all, more than 100 horses, and 18 cannon.
Okay.
The operation takes nearly 10 hours, far longer than expected.
Washington was sitting on the east bank of the Delaware on the New Jersey side, wrapped in his cloak against the weather, and wondering, should he call it off? And came very close to doing that. They were now so late that they'd be attacking in daylight. And he felt that surprise would be lost, and the operation became even more desperate. But then he decided that to get those men into the boats and send them back again might be even more difficult than going forward. And so off they went.
Finally, at 3 o'clock in the morning, the Army is in New Jersey, now facing a grueling 9-mile march to Trenton.
As they marched down the road towards Trenton, Washington's horse slid off the bank of the road and started to go down into a gully. And everybody thought for a moment that this was going to be a disaster, that he may go tumbling down and he would get killed. And instead, with those huge, long arms of his, he grabbed the horse's reins and literally dragged it back on the road. Just turned its head and got it back on that road.
The men remained together for 5 miles, then split into 2 columns. Along the way, 2 men freeze to death. At 8 in the morning, both columns reached the small village of Trenton. About 1,500 Hessians are there, under the command of Colonel Johann Rall. He had been warned of American plans, but is confident an attack is unlikely. Then, the unlikely attack begins.
We got within 200 yards of about 300 or 400 Hessians. Orders were given to charge bayonets and rush on we did. Before they had time to reload, we were within 3 feet of them when they broke, and ran like so many frightened devils.
Colonel Rall is shot and mortally wounded. His men lay down their weapons and surrender. There would later be rumors that the Hessians had been partying. In fact, they fought nobly, but were soundly defeated.
The myth is that the Hessians were drunk, that they were celebrating Christmas, that their commander was drunk, and I think none of that was true. The Hessians fought with great courage. Their officers led them with great resolve.
The Battle of Trenton is over in less than 2 hours. 22 Hessians are dead, and nearly 900 captured. Washington describes American casualties as very trifling. The victors and their prisoners march back upriver and cross the Delaware again. They reach camp in Pennsylvania, exhausted, ill, malnourished. But they had marched 20 miles, defying both the weather and the odds. News of the battle spreads through the colonies.
It really suddenly gave them a new sense of the possibility of a revolution that many of them thought had been lost. And the word began to spread.
Now they saw that there was an army that had looked the enemy in the face and won. And this just gave a huge surge of courage.
And it also really shook the other side. It gave them a sense that suddenly this was a much tougher proposition.
The news also reaches the British and General Howe.
The unfortunate and untimely defeat at Trenton has thrown us farther back from the great encouragement it has given to the rebels.
Howe, orders General Cornwallis to return to New Jersey with 8,000 men. Meanwhile, Washington convenes a war council with his top aides. They decide to cross the Delaware again to take full advantage of the British confusion. The weather has gotten even worse. Bitter cold, deep snow. The Delaware has nearly frozen over, making another crossing even more difficult than the first. But in the final days of 1776, Washington's army again makes its way across the Delaware into New Jersey. Many enlistments will expire at the end of the year, and Washington implores his men to stay.
My brave fellows, your country is at stake. Your wives, your houses, and all that you hold dear. You have worn yourselves out with fatigues and hardships, but we know not how to spare you. If you will consent to stay 1 month longer, you will render that service to the cause of liberty and to your country, which you probably can never do under any other circumstances. The present is emphatically the crisis, which is to decide our destiny.
December 30th, 1776. Washington and his army are in Trenton, where they had defeated the Hessians just 4 days earlier. They expect to be attacked from the north. 10 miles up the road, thousands of British and Hessian troops are gathering in Princeton, preparing to march to Trenton. Washington positions some of his men halfway between Trenton and Princeton. Their assignment is to delay the inevitable British advance. Back in Trenton, Washington's forces are ready. January 2nd, 1777. The rebels' newfound confidence is about to be tested. General Cornwallis and a massive force are marching toward Trenton, eager for an all-out battle. Along the way, Americans engage the British in a series of skirmishes, delaying their advance. The delays are costly to the British, who finally reach Trenton at sundown. Washington and his troops have taken positions on the south side of the Assunpink Creek. This is the Second Battle of Trenton. Three times the British attack the Assunpink Creek Bridge. 3 times they are repelled, taking heavy casualties. One American soldier later described the carnage.
Their dead bodies lay thicker and closer together than I ever beheld sheaves of wheat lying in a field which the reapers had just passed.
As darkness falls, the Americans are encamped on one side of the creek, the British on the other. The Redcoats expect to easily defeat Washington the next morning.
In the night, Washington had some of his men build fires, and they could hear sounds of digging. They thought, oh, the Americans are entrenching there on the hill. No, they're trying to keep warm with all these fires. Meanwhile, Washington's whole army marched by back roads and completely outflanked the British army that was sitting in front of Trenton. And the next thing you know, in the early morning, they attacked the British garrison in Princeton.
This time, the frigid weather is an asset, turning muddy roads solid, enabling Washington and his men to move through the night. It is dawn, January 3rd. American General Nathaniel Greene is leading his troops on Quaker Road, heading north to Princeton. A mile and a half from town, they encounter British troops heading south. With a ferocious British bayonet charge, the Battle of Princeton begins on the farms of William and Thomas Clark. American General Hugh Mercer is stabbed with a bayonet 7 times and will die 9 days later. In the midst of the chaos, Washington arrives with reinforcements and inspiration.
He rode down the line between the British and the Americans and gave the order to fire while he was right there, in between the 2 lines. And one of Washington's aides, Colonel Fitzgerald, put his hat over his head, over his face, like that, because he was sure Washington was a dead man. And this huge billow of smoke rose from the muskets on both sides, and when it cleared away, there was Washington, still on his horse. It was just miraculous.
The Battle of Princeton is another stunning American victory, another cause for hope. General Nathaniel Greene wrote about the startling turn of events.
The 2 late actions at Trenton and Princeton have put a very different face upon affairs.
And a good many British officers began to doubt that the American war was winnable. And this only a few weeks after they thought that it had been won.
Following victory at Princeton, George Washington decides to march north to Morristown, New Jersey. He will spend the winter with his wife Martha and his most trusted officers, rebuilding the army, planning future strategy. The war is certainly not over. There will be 6 more years of fighting. But there has been a remarkable turnaround. A British historian later summed up the battles of Trenton and Princeton. It may be doubted, he wrote, whether so small a number of men ever employed so short a space of time with greater and more lasting effects upon the history of the world.
If the Americans had failed at Trenton and Princeton, or either one of them, they would have become peaceful, submissive, obedient servants of His Majesty George III, and the whole marvelous spirit of independence and liberty that has animated this country would have really vanished.
In those 10 days, as 1776 gave way to a new year, despair gave way to hope. Gloom was replaced by confidence, and a new nation, still in its infancy, was beginning to stand on its own.